Hey everybody, Barry here again. We are almost done with this mismatched, pieces missing, all around colors puzzle. Today we're going to do disc brake conversion on the back. It's going to be really exciting. Okay, so what we have here is my 9-inch Ford, but whoever bought the axles that I bought it off of, they bought them with a bolt pattern of 5 on 4 3/4, Chevy bolt pattern, small cars, small SUVs, that kind of thing. So I had to buy rotors and pads and calipers, of course, to do a disc brake conversion. This is all off of a Blazer, 98 or something up to 05. So these are the left and right calipers, the brake pads, and the 2 rotors, which I already have bolted onto the rear end. So the only part about this that's going to require any real fabrication is making the bracket that will bolt the caliper to the rear differential housing. So I've got to make a bracket to go from these 2 bolt holes over to the rear end housing here and weld it all together, and then I'll be able to bolt it on. I have to make sure that I don't get it too close out to here where it'll strike, or too close this way where it'll strike. So it's got to be pretty precise. And that's what we're going to work at right now. What I've got here is a foot of 1/4 inch thick by 4 inch wide flat bar. Also, I picked up some grade 8 bolts. These are 3/8 by 16, 1.25 inches long, so it'll be able to bolt through the caliper. And I might either thread this or put a nut on the back of it and thread the nut, weld the nut to the plate metal. This is our mock-up bracket, something I made out of cardboard. Not exactly to scale, but it's been measured and cut out. It looks about right. So I got this put together. I'm going to try to do this one-handed, but it's pretty well right. Okay, couldn't do it one-handed. What we have is the bracket will bolt to the caliper. Here we go, and weld to the rear end. So what I'm going to do now is transfer the cardboard cutout over onto the plate metal. Cardboard is even threaded. We're going to put this one over here and transfer it kind of like this. Mark it out, mark our holes. Singing. The bracket is more or less cut out, but now I got to drill the holes to mount the caliper. The holes are 3 inches apart, and this plate is just shy of 4 inches. So what I'm going to do is grab my marker, and we're going to start from this edge over here and go a 1/2 inch right there, and go 3.5 inches. So that leaves us 3 inches between the 1/2 inch mark here and the 3.5 here. So I'll drill some pilot holes and line it up with the caliper, make sure it's square, and then we'll be good. Now that we've got our pilot holes drilled, we can take our first bracket, line it up on another piece of sheet metal, and now we can trace out our second one. We have 2 matching brackets. Put them together in the vise, and drilled right down through the first set of holes into the second, so they'll line up perfect. And I put them in the bench on the bench grinder there and grinded them down to get them as even as I could, and I'm happy with how it's turning out so far. We'll get the holes drilled out more. I'll run a 3/8 tap through here and bolt it through the caliper and into this bracket. We'll see how it goes. Bracket turned out awesome. The 2 threaded holes worked out perfect. Tightens up nice. It's nice and square and flat. And let's try it on the rear end and see how it looks. So the caliper bracket fit pretty good. Lines up in the rear end nice. The only issue I have is it's not really deep enough because the pad still has some showing. So I got to cut this down about 1/4 inch on the round part here that bolts to, or that welds to the rear end. So I'll take a little bit off of that one and we'll come back and see what it looks like. We're getting dangerously close to having something here. What I got to do now is level up the caliper, make sure it's, you know, not up and down on each side. It's got to be perfectly level. So I'm going to run a level across the top of the bracket and try to get, say, 0 degrees so both are even, and then I'll tack weld it. We've got a brake. Man, it looks good. Fits really well, nice and snug. Looks good, nice and centered on the rotor here. I only got it tacked, but I'll be able to weld it. And the pads sit nice and flush on the rotor, doesn't stick out any. Seems like we got a good space between the caliper and the rotors here. So I'm going to go ahead and tack the other side, get them set up and see what it looks like. Man, how sick is that? This thing just keeps getting nicer looking. I've never had disc brakes on the back of this truck before. It's always been ugly drums and it just looks awful. And this is beautiful. I can't wait to get it running, get it on the road and see how responsive the brakes are now. Great. I went ahead and bolted everything on and got the brake hoses bolted on. This one's going to sort of curl up like this and then head straight up from here and into the block right there. So what I'm using is copper nickel or NICOP brake line. This is 3/16 standard, and this stuff is awesome. It bends really easily, it resists rust and corrosion, so in a year it doesn't look like garbage like steel lines do, especially here where there's a lot of rust and salt on the roads all the time. So let's get these bent up and put into place, and then I'll find a way to mount these here. I don't have the actual mounting tabs, so I think I'll use the rubber insulated straps with like a bolt or something and just sort of bolt it on right here and try to make it look as neat and nice as I can. We have brake lines. Comes from the block down here, loops into the caliper. The other side comes along the top of the housing, down, and loops into the right caliper. Now we're just going to crack the bleed screws, see if we can get some fluid out. I've had a pair of ice grips on the brake hose now for a few months, so it might be a little bit pinched together, but we should get brake fluid here in a minute. We've got drips out of one side. Here's side number 2, draining brake fluid. Good, now we can pump up the brakes and see if I can just gravity bleed it for tonight till somebody gets in tomorrow and they can help me pump the brakes up and I'll bleed it. I gotta get down under the truck and have a look at this. Man, that looks ridiculous. Oh, I love it. That is so cool. So that's it for the disc brake conversion. If I had known it was going to be this easy, I would have done it a long time ago. It's easier to set up the caliper, make the brackets, bolt it all together, and set up brake hoses than it is to replace a set of shoes on the drums, and that is a serious pain. So that's going to be it for the video today. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.